My first question is, first of all, do you support the Solidarity labor movement in Poland?
The Solidarity labor movement in Poland doesn't exist anymore. It's been broken. I supported the very real and legitimate complaints that Solidarity made in Poland, which was that there was a Polish government that was corrupt, that it had drastically mismanaged things, that that gotten itself into a national debt which now called for cutback. Here's what the Polish government did. They said, we want to have major capitalization and industrialize, but we also want an increase in consumer goods and consumption. Now, how do you do both those things? How do you use your capital for capitalization and use it also for consumption, increasing consumption? Oh, they found a way. There were Western banks who would lend them the money. And somebody forgot to sit down with his calculator and see what does $1 million do at a certain percent interest over a certain number of years. You know what it does? It grows and grows and grows and grows. And suddenly when those notes came due, the Polish government turned around and said, oh, we goofed. In order to pay these notes, they have to do what all countries had to do under the IMF and the World Bank. Well, IMF, really. What the IMF does when the bucks are out there and you're not paying it, they introduce what's called a stabilization program, which means, very simply, you've got to cut back on consumption. Consume less for your workers, less social service, less that, so you have more money and more, give them less, more to export, more to earn, more to pay back our debt. So the government turned around to the workers right around Christmas time too and said, sorry, we're going to have to put a freeze on this, put a freeze on that, cut back on that, cut back on meat consumption, so forth and so on. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And the workers went out with a whole array of very real grievances. I also supported them in the subsequent months when the government did what often many vested governments do, or your average college dean, stall, not agree to the agreements and then not carry some of them out and all that sort of thing. I did not agree with Solidarity when Lech Wałęsa, who was after all a close associate of Jack Kurin of CORE, who himself is a right-winger, a close associate of Milczewski, who was head of the Confederation for an Independent Poland, who was an open fascist sympathizer, when Lech Wałęsa got up and said, and who, by the way, is an open admirer of Ronald Reagan. The Harvard International Review has an interview with him and say, what do you think? And Lech Wałęsa volunteers, Ronald Reagan is a great president. When he said we will be moving towards state power, I didn't support that move because I believe that the Solidarity leadership was anti-socialist, right-wing. I believe the kind of anarcho-syndical worker ownership they had about the factories was so half-baked that the economy would have been totally wrecked. They had no plans as to how that system would work. How would you get the steel to the shipyards? What if a factory decided to move into a new line? What do you do about the fact that some factories are far more productive than others? What do you do about social services? How do you reallocate the surplus value so that you can have services for people who can't work? All those questions were never dealt with by Solidarity, so that's my criticism of Solidarity. Yeah.
You mentioned East Germany. Now, I mean, you briefly went over, how it could be a good country and everything. Now, why did they build a wall around their country to prevent their people from leaving? And why, during the building of that wall, did they shoot their own citizens? Workers' paradise in this way.
Well, you see, just drop that kind of loaded vocabulary of workers' paradise, and let's get back to your original statement about, you said that the Soviet worker has it so much better than the American worker. In certain aspects, I said in terms of job security, pension, retirement, protections against inflation, that sort of thing. If you want to measure it in terms of numbers of color television sets, even television sets now, 97% or whatever, very high, 90-something% of the people all have television sets. The only areas are certain remote parts of the country, there's no television yet. But everybody's got television sets, so big deal. East Germany, there's several things that happen there. Again, it's a question of brain drain. Again, don't forget that during World War II, it was the eastern part of Germany that got the bulk of the Allied bombing. So when the partition came, East Germany was a much more severely damaged area than West Germany. Don't forget also that the Soviets then made a strategic mistake. They started looking for reparations, and they stripped some of the heavy machinery from East Germany, whereas the West started pouring billions of dollars into West Germany. So there was a tremendous consumer prosperity in West Germany. Don't forget also that a good portion of the population in East Germany were Nazis and Hitler sympathizers, a good 20% of the people. And they wanted to get the hell out, and things were not good for them. And one of the first things the East German governments did was get rid of 80% of the teachers who had taught under Nazi Germany and collaborated with Nazi Germany. Got rid of a lot of the judges. Got rid of a lot. Well, those people and their families wanted to get west, where they could have a more comfortable time. And then again, there's that hemorrhaging and brain drain, which the East Germans were not inclined to tolerate. And so they sealed their border, because that kind of migration would have seriously interfered with their economic development. Today, East Germany is about the what? The 6th or 7th most powerful industrial country in the world. It's only got 18 million people in it, and very prosperous. And very prosperous. All right, can we go on to the next person? I think you asked me a couple of questions that you see. You asked me a couple of questions which really require very complicated and protracted answers, given the abyss of information, the dearth of information in our country about these things. What we have is a few things. Oh, the East Germans wanted to jump across the wall. They weren't free. What do you think about that? Well, it's time we start thinking about that and getting some information as to what were the things behind that. And I just gave you what was my answer. And there are other people online. Yes.